Welcome back, friends. My head certainly is filled with things to say this evening as I come back to the broadcast here on Corbett Report Radio. I am your host, James Corbett of CorbettReport.com, back in town here in the western part of Japan, and back and ready as ever to bring you some more exciting conversations this week on the broadcast. And thank you to all of those who tuned in and who kept the faith last week as I was away on vacation for Global Research TV. I can now spill the beans a little bit more about what I was doing. I was actually off to Beijing, China for a week to do some interviews with some scholars and professors and writers and thinkers in China talking about China-U.S. relations, and that's going to be part of a forthcoming documentary project which will be being released in installments, probably starting towards the end of this month. So, of course, I will let you know more about that as it starts to come out. But once again, it is great to be back on the program. Of course, it's nice to get away and to do something completely different and to see a different part of the world, but it's always nice to come back home. And home for me these days is the sunny climes of Western Japan, where it is unfortunately extremely rainy this evening. So, well, an appropriate mood for our rainy and stormy subject matter tonight anyway. Tonight we're going to be talking about the technological singularity and the coming merger of mankind and machines, and the point at which machines start to become a form of life unto themselves, which to some people still sounds like science fiction fantasy, but unfortunately is becoming more and more of a mundane reality, as evidenced by these two stories, which both came out in the past 24 hours, but I thought they were pretty interesting, so I've highlighted them for you. One is from Yahoo Tech, and it's under the headline, Google offering to pay web users to track their every move. It says, quote, less than a month after announcing a controversial new privacy policy that shares user data across all its sites with no opt-out option, Google is introducing a system to monitor all online activity of those who participate in a program called ScreenWise. In exchange for unrestricted access to information on your every online move, the search and software giant is offering financial compensation. And it goes on to detail how people can get in-store Amazon credit by basically signing over their entire online lives and giving up all of their privacy to Google, as if there's really any privacy left to be had on the internet, or there ever was. But still, it's just formalizing what we know has been going on behind the scenes for a very long time. Another interesting story that popped up on my radar today from Benzinga.com. Is your iPhone a new therapist or antidepressant? It says, stop popping pills and pick up an iPhone instead. That's the message being sent by the researchers behind Mobilize, a new iPhone app designed to help users overcome depression. According to Popular Science, the app uses a variety of data, such as your location, social activity, and physical activity, to determine if a person is behaving normally. If a person is not, the app can do things to help the user overcome his or her negative feelings. For starters, Mobilize can automatically text the user's family and friends, hoping to spark a motivating conversation. Alternatively, it can text the depressed user and attempt to persuade him/her to reach out to a friend or to get out of the house. End quote. And if that doesn't seem at least slightly creepy to you, and if the implications are not quite all there for you, I would once again suggest an excellent book by Aaron Franz, who we've had on the program before, called Revolve, Man's Scientific Rise to Godhood. And let me just read a little bit from the end of chapter 2. Quote, understand that it would be impossible to implement the transhuman vision and remain completely human. A post-human would be so different from us that it could not be considered the same species. The end of life as we know it is the only thing that we could be certain of upon entering a post-human world. Now, if this isn't a dark concept, then I don't know what is. Well, we're going to be just exploring more about this concept, the technological singularity and transhumanism and all of the implications tonight in a conversation with our old friend Marc Ressl in Argentina. So stay tuned on the line. We'll be right back right after this. right, a little Paradise from Coldplay to play us into tonight's show, but we are definitely not talking about paradise, or at least that's my take on it. But let's start exploring tonight's topic, and tonight we're going to be talking about the technological singularity with our old friend Marc Ressl, who I've interviewed before on the Corbett Report, and I've also interviewed here on Corbett Report Radio. We talked about consciousness a couple of months ago. I received quite a lot of positive feedback about that conversation, a very interesting conversation. So if you want to dip into the archives to refamiliarize yourself with Marc, of course that conversation and all of previous episodes of this broadcast are available in the RBN archives. And let's start talking to Marc in Argentina. And for those who are new to Marc, you can find his own blog at marcspointofview.blogspot.com, and that's Marc, M-A-R-C. So, Marc, thank you so much for joining us again tonight. It's great to have you back on the program.
Well, thank you for the invitation again. And as I said last time, I know it's going to be a very interesting journey tonight as well, today, as you're in Japan.
And there you go. Exactly right. Okay. Well, how could it fail to be an interesting conversation when we're talking about such an absolutely fascinating topic, and one that really goes to the heart of so many different things, including even the question of what is humanity, what is a human, and are we losing that, and what are the implications of these sentient machines that are coming into view, and all of these things that we're thinking about these days. But for people who really are new to the concept of the singularity, do you have any ideas of where people can start to get a handle on this topic?
Okay, so you want to know about the technological singularity, my dear listener. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to tell you what the singularity is. You will have to see for yourself. And I guess you know that from some movie maybe, like The Matrix. Okay, so I think we're going to do something very different, something interactive. And so you will have to go to a computer if you're listening, and if you're not able to, you just write it up. The URL I'm going to give you now, and you have to go to singularity.com/charts, and you will find lots of nice, interesting charts with very interesting data. And as I told you, I'm not going to explain you what the singularity is. You just look, for example, there is a chart. I don't know if you're seeing this. There is a chart which is called paradigm shifts. And the idea of this chart is like it's a plot of significant events that happened during the history of mankind. And, well, just to be fair, there's like many different offers, because not everybody agrees on what is a significant event in the history of mankind. That is a very, very hard to answer question. And if you look at this plot, well, it's maybe it's a little bit too hard to understand, but you'll notice there is a trend. You can see it's going down. I don't know if you're looking at it, James, or...
I am indeed, yes. A paradigm shifts for 15 lists of key events, and it shows a logarithmic plot of time before present versus time to next event, talking about some of the key events in the formation of the universe, it looks like.
Aha, that's right. So what do you make of this?
Well, it seems
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm a professor and I don't want you to be in this position, but it just happened. Sorry. Okay.
I feel like I'm taking a test. Well, having seen Ray Kurzweil's presentations before, I know where this is going, and he likes to show these logarithmic graphs. And a straight line on a logarithmic graph represents an exponential increase in something. So in this case, we're seeing an exponential increase in the rate of events that are of universal significance, or at least significant events in terms of human development. And I guess the implication of this is that as we approach that time to next event zero line, we're getting closer and closer to the point where events will start happening so quickly, such events of such great scale and magnitude will start happening so quickly that basically in the metaphorical blink of an eye, the world will be changing around us in ways that will be difficult for average humans to grasp.
Exactly, absolutely. Now, is there any way you can change this plot? What do you think, James?
Any way you can change this plot?
I don't believe this. Is there any way you could, this is just nonsense. There is no way this is actually true.
Well, the obvious thing would be to dispute the events that are taken as the key events that are being plotted, but that's obviously why he's chosen for 15 different lists to show that they all plot in pretty much the same way.
Well, that's the problem. Is it avoidable? I don't know. But it's very interesting, at least. I mean, just this data. I'm an engineer. I look at things like I like data, I like evidence, and this is very hard evidence, I must confess. So this is really interesting. So what does this mean? Like, there is something going on now, actually, and it's not just like in the last few years or last few decades or even centuries, just in the last few eons. And it's somehow converging. So there's this big problem. I mean, something is going to happen. I think it's very hard to just like disagree with this idea. The only way I think you could just like say this is not going to happen is just like say, evolution is wrong. And I have a problem with not believing that. I mean, with believing that. So I tend to think this is actually going to happen. So this is bad news for all of you people who just say, I don't want this. I just want it. Or things.
Yeah, well, I must admit, after having seen some of Kurzweil's lectures, he does make an extremely convincing case that this type of exponential growth is going on, not just in terms of microprocessors, transistors per microprocessors, the famous Moore's law that processing power basically doubles every 18 months or whatever it is, but that it's happening in so many different fields, and you can plot basically the same type of exponential growth in so many different things. It is a very, very convincing argument that he puts forth, because it relies on so many different things from so many different fields that all seem to be converging towards this type of exponential growth, where suddenly it seems like in the next, well, certainly in this century, we're likely to see some sort of incredible events that would be pretty much unthinkable from our own point of view right now.
Mm-hmm, absolutely, but usually you don't hear this in the alternative media, like somebody saying, "Oh, this is unavoidable." Well, that's my point of view. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, as I always tell people, but I see that problem. There is a lot of data, and it's actually converging. Now, this has been happening, but when did people see it? Now, this is a different question. Like, when did people start to get aware, like, oh, something is happening, actually? Well, of course, you can always have the conspiratory argument, or not all the truth is out there, so maybe it was known by the Egyptians. Who knows? Maybe I don't know what happened actually 10,000 years ago exactly. Nobody knows. But if you look at like mainstream mainstream information and documents, you can actually verify. Well, there is a very famous phrase by Darwin, and this was said in the late 1800s, and he said, "It became increasingly plausible to view the current version of humanity not as the end point of evolution, but rather as a possible quite early phase." Aha. So interesting, really interesting. And then in the mid 1951, there was this very important. I think he was mathematician. I'm not very sure about this, but Alan Turing actually he modeled how a computer program works, and he said machines might outstrip humans in the future. And then in 1958, you had this quote by Ulam, and I don't know if you heard about the H-bomb. Well, the H-bomb design was done by Ulam, and I forgot the other guy. And von Neumann was actually your computer, the one you're using, is a von Neumann machine, so very important people. And he talked about accelerating change. So it's like the idea is evolving by itself. And then the first person to actually evoke the term technological singularity was Vernor Vinge. And he's a mathematician. He wrote a sci-fi novel, which I read it. It's actually, I must say, very interesting, Fire Upon the Deep. And, well, he coined that term, I think it was in the 80s. So actually, I believe that this is what's out there, but I believe this has been known for quite some time, because if you're really like in control of things, you know what's going to happen, you know where you have to invest in what technology. So I think you could actually somehow envision what would be happening. But of course, I don't know. This is just like my personal opinion on this matter. So And
another thing to keep in mind with that is that if you are keeping the most advanced technology secret behind national security classification or what have you, then if you are 30 to 40 to 50 to who knows how many years ahead of the game in terms of your advanced technologies, then you can always seem to be predicting the future by simply saying what you already know that the general public doesn't know.
Well, actually, I agree with that idea, but the question is, do you have evidence? I don't have evidence. I would just suggest it's likely, but I don't have evidence. You have to be careful if you don't have evidence. And
we do have evidence of all sorts of technologies that have been hidden from the public for many years, in some cases decades, before they were finally admitted.
Oh, yeah, I know that, but I mean hard evidence. This is this document proving. You always hear rumors or these kind of evidence, which if you have an open mind won't you will listen to that. But hard evidence, this is possible. No, you don't get that.
I'm sure the U-2 was probably a conspiracy theory to the Russians until they shot it down.
Absolutely, that's my point. But okay, there is interesting things. For example, I personally, the internet, it was invented in the 60s, and I personally believe it was, how do you say this, announced to the public or given to the commercial interest, how do you say this, in order just to be a mechanism of control.
Right, it was introduced to the public as the mechanism of control. Exactly right. Well, let's take a short break. We'll be right back after this.
Oh, okay.
It's time to get the facts straight. Rosicrucians, Freemasons, the people in the shadows, Ashy Cedars, Max Templars.
All right, welcome back, friends. Welcome back to Corbett Report Radio here on this Monday night as we're talking to Marc Ressl of marcspointofview.blogspot.com. Once again, that's Marc's, M-A-R-C-S. pointofview.blogspot.com. And tonight we're talking about the concept of the technological singularity. And we've talked a little bit about some of the precursors to this and some of the people who are involved in the formation of this idea. But perhaps it's time to start evoking some of the technologies themselves and what types of technologies we're talking about when we talk about the coming singularity. So, Marc, why don't we start getting into that realm?
Okay, let me give you just a little bit of an introduction. The first event was the Big Bang. Okay, this is not a technology. Then you had events like life, like the first unicellular cell, the first multicellular organism, and those are events, but basically there is no technology involved in those events except in what happened 10,000 years ago when you started having agriculture and you had this great capability to produce food. So this changed a lot. So if you look at this trend, there are presently a certain number of technologies that would actually enable this kind of making things faster and faster and faster. And before I talk about technologies, there is a very interesting idea which actually Kurzweil discusses, and that's the idea of, wait a moment, I had it in my mind and now I forgot it. The idea of, returning, how do you say this? You have a technology that enables a second technology that actually, it's like everything is enabling a new class of technology that enables a new class of technology. The internet enables YouTube, the YouTube enables this enables that.
Right. And, so yes, it's building on itself.
It's building on itself and it's overlapping. So if you look at I first heard about the technological singularity myself in 1999, because there is this book by Kurzweil, I read it. Wait a moment. Okay. And the three technologies that were announced then were genetics, and everybody knows that, and I don't think I have to talk too much about genetics and what the dangers are, because we are already in that revolution. I mean, nobody realizes it, but at least in America, most of the corn that is produced is GMO. Here in Argentina, we have all of the soya beans is GMO. I think in Europe, there is still resistance. I've heard about this argument in Hungary. But they just said no to GMO. I find that very interesting. I'm not against GMO. I think there are things that can be done that can actually help people, but the kind of GMO that only makes money has a problem, because what's left for our children. That's a problem. And so that's actually something which is like past history, genetics. We're in there, and there's much more to come. I think we are about to have the $1,000 genome. I mean, you just pay that price and you get your genome, and you get it you download it, and there it is. You can know a lot of things about you and where you come from and all these things. Second technology that was talked about in 1999 was nanotechnology. Nanotechnology is just making things very small, like very, very tiny robots that can actually like scour your body or can like build things. And for example, you want to have a pizza, then you just say, oh, I want a pizza, and your pizza is made from atoms, literally. Well, I don't know if that is particularly practical, because there are applications that are much more important, but it makes a point, okay? And the third technology that was discussed back then was robotics. Robotics, they don't mean robots, actually. That's a very old word. They actually meant like artificial intelligence. So this means like solving unknown problems in a short time and in a general way. And something which happened recently was this. There is talk about a new kind of technology, you could call it that way, which is called artificial general intelligence, which is AGI. And that is something I particularly find interesting, and you should pay attention to. That's AGI. And now we have new technologies which weren't recognized in the 90s, which is brain-computer interfaces, which is like mainly like how are you connected, how can information from your brain be extracted, or how could you manipulate what happens in the brain. There are many like ways of doing this. There is invasive technology, you get an implant. I don't think that's going to be the way. Then you have non-invasive technology, and for example, you have the functional magnetic resonance imaging. You have many technologies that allow you, not at this stage, but will probably allow you to know the state of each neuron in real time. So if you are able, and now comes the hard problem with understanding this, if you're able to copy the state of the brain in silicon, and you're able to emulate that brain, what does that mean? So James, what do you think?
Well, it raises the possibility that we'll be able to eventually create artificial people in a way, or even to copy ourselves into some sort of robotic form.
Well, I just said a very simple. That's just a very simple statement, which I said you can upload your mind. That's the word that the community, the Singularity community or transhumanism community uses. You upload your mind. But it leads to a lot of questions, like who are you, what does that mean, is it possible? Well, I guess we'll touch that in the next block.
Absolutely. Well, it goes to the very heart of some of the questions that philosophers have been asking since the dawn of humanity, I'm sure, and now it's becoming a very, very real question, and more so as every day passes and as we get closer to that singularity. So on that note, let's take a short break. We'll be right back after these messages.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.
All right, everyone, this is a song I wrote called It's in Your Hands for a film called United We Fall.
Friends, of course, that's our old friend Dan Dix of PressForTruth.tv, so I hope you are tuned in to Press for Truth and all the excellent work that they're doing, including, of course, Dan Dix's own compositions, which he makes for his own documentaries. Of course, that is It's in Your Hands, one of my personal favorites. And tonight we're talking to Marc Ressl in Argentina, and we're talking about the concept of the technological singularity. So let's start to pick up where we left off before the break, getting into some of the very fascinating philosophical questions and implications of some of these technologies that we see coming down the line. I'm not sure where you'd like to pick up this conversation, but Marc, why don't you go ahead?
Well, we were talking about like what it means to upload your mind, and I don't want to touch that now because we would be talking like 10 hours at least, and I think there are more interesting there is a more interesting issue, which is like, what are people who believe in the singularity like? That's a very interesting question. Like, because everything is done by people, and it's not like done by machines, at least.
When you say believe in, do you mean believe in as in the sense they think it's coming, or believe in the sense that they actually want it to come?
In both senses.
Mm.
Yeah. And, well, I must tell my personal experience. I did attend, there is a summit, it's like a conference, and it's done yearly. It's called the Singularity Summit. And I did attend the Singularity Summit 2008, which was, that's been quite some time, 4 years or 5. But, well, it was very interesting because I actually got to know some people. I met Kurzweil, and I met very interesting people. And, well, I don't agree exactly with what they want, but it's very interesting to know them and to know what they think, or have an idea at least of what they think, because I never know what they exactly think. So my impression was like, well, there was something very, very strange going on. It was like nerddom. I don't know if you got that word, like the kingdom of the nerds, to be honest. And I'm one myself, so I don't care. But it was, yeah, I know. But it was like everything. It was like, actually, I found it very interesting. It was people who were just like saying we can make the future. There was not like control or we are just like Illuminati, and no, it was just like university professors, students. I'm sorry, but there were some people who had mental problems as well. I met a couple, but in general, I must say it was very, very interesting because it wasn't what I expected. It was at that time and even now, it was like very interesting people, like people who had actually no idea what it meant, what the control meant, and what the possibilities are. And it's actually a different point of view. You would expect something completely different. So, and I remember at that time, one of the main topics I overheard, or like in chit chat, what you would hear is, "Are you a believer?" I mean, come on, this is engineering university professors, and are you a believer? So that's the kind of situation, like, where it's, are you sure about this? Are you not sure? Is this what? I mean, it was actually very interesting because it was like discussing, like we are discussing, for example, what do we want the future to be? Well, they were doing that in 2008, but in a like nice way, like open way. I mean, like exciting way, like let's do this, let's do that, let's try this. But I thought it was also a little bit naive. Well, like the official event, like the people who were there, and I can't talk about the people who are there now because I just had this experience, but they were like, everything was nice. Like when you read all this material, when you read all the, well, you know, The Singularity is Near is a book by Ray Kurzweil. Everything is too optimistic, in my opinion. It's like there is not too much of an emphasis on what can go wrong, and everything can go wrong if that happens. And I have no idea what's even possible, because this is so big, so complicated, that I have heard about this for like, I don't know, well, it's been like 13 years, and I still haven't grasped everything. So that's a big issue.
And I should point out for people who are listening who are interested in the Singularity Summit, I believe they keep records of their proceedings online, and there are usually videos of their conferences and things that I've watched in the past. So I'm sure they can be found online readily if people want to check out what kinds of talks they give there.
I absolutely encourage everyone to go to the SingularitySummit.com site and check the videos. Absolutely, because it's all open. Everything that has been done there is all in the open. You can see the videos, you can see the conferences, you can see the discussions. Everything is open, and it's highly interesting, very interesting. So for example, one of the other things I overheard, which was there was chat about, for example, people, professors, important like researchers talking about, is the technological singularity the apocalypse that was announced in scripture, which I would have never ever expected that kind of phrase in my life, and maybe it is, I don't know, but it's at least very interesting to hear. And okay, and then I would like, if you want some references to something, because when you're dealing with a subject, you always have to study it. You have to get hard information, because Otherwise, you're just like imagining things. You're just like not imagining. Like I think it's that way, and you don't know. You just have to make very sure. So I'll give you just some references. There is a guy you can check on him. He's called Michael Vassar. He's the head of the Singularity University, and actually I know someone from Argentina who's going to go there now. I'm sure it's going to be very interesting to hear about this. Then there is another guy who's called Ben Goertzel. He's into artificial intelligence. Actually, what I find, just a little detail on what he's doing, he experimented with artificial persona, so like artificial people on Second Life. So he programmed like a bot on Second Life that would pose as a human and would try to interact with real humans. I find that very interesting.
Incidentally, doesn't that go back to Alan Turing himself that we talked about earlier, who claimed that machines were outstripping humans? And if I remember correctly, I correct me if I'm wrong, but Turing invented a Turing test, which was a test to basically for artificial intelligence, basically saying that if a computer can convince a human operator that that they don't know whether it's a computer or a human, then we can, for all intents and purposes, say that artificial intelligence has been achieved.
Absolutely. And actually I find it very interesting because if you're in Second Life, you don't know if it's a human or not. Well, I don't know. Okay, then there's a very interesting reference, which is a Stephen Wolfram, and he's the author of Mathematica, which is a tool we use a lot at our university, and he also has a website which is called Wolfram Alpha, which is, I don't know if you used that, but it's a very
I used it once. It wasn't that helpful, but it was interesting.
It's very interesting because you just type in, for example, what's the distance to the moon, and it gives you the distance to the moon right now. It works. And many, for example, who was I don't know, it's very smart actually. And I would say his research is very interesting. Then you have, I don't know if you heard about the X Prize, those prizes given to outstanding achievements, like there was this Spaceship One, which is for the first time a commercial aircraft that was able to fly out of space, which is that line defined as 100 kilometers. And well, X Prize is like a prize given to, an award given to those kind of achievements in order to, of course, to advance the singularity. Another one who's very interesting is Jürgen Schmidhuber. He's actually, I think he's from Germany, and he's in Switzerland. It has that German umlaut, that U with double. Okay, and he's into artificial general intelligence. Actually, has very interesting talks, and I absolutely encourage you to look up those people and just look what they do. And I think that's going to be very interesting. Now I also heard talk about an economist, and it was very interesting because he talked like about the importance of money and the importance of infrastructure. For example, people today are making a building, and they are planning to get the return of the investment in like 50, 40, 30 years. What happens if this singularity happens? Will you get your money back? And he was talking about these kind of issues. And I also find that very interesting. Like, what is going to happen with money? Will it still make sense? And those were the questions he put. And I found that very interesting. And there's also companies that are involved. For example, I heard the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer of Intel, in a talk. And he talked about like how Intel was prepared for this singularity. They have a plan which goes 10 years in the future, and they know what the technology is going to be. They don't have it actually very defined, but they know what it's going to be. It's not commercial yet, but that was actually his statement. I'm not just like conspiracy. No, you can look it up and search and listen to his words. So that's very interesting. And there was actually some other interesting talk I remember about researcher from IBM, and they made a brain simulation that was able to simulate the brain of a small rat. And this was 4 years ago. I have been reading to what they had, what the advancements have been, but that in per se is pretty impressive. And I personally think like there's a lot of people who actually are like they don't have bad intentions, at least at that level where you have like an open conference and you can actually interact with like professors and people who are researching these kind of things. And well, I don't know if you wanted to change the topic a little bit and talk about why are actually all these people doing it.
Let's go ahead, because I think that is one of the fundamental basis for the conversation.
So I guess there is a little bit of like, I want to be special, I want to be in the future, I want to change the future, and there's a lot of people who are like naive, and they are like about this, like changing things, and probably with good intentions. But I for example, the people like the old timers at the conference, I was a little bit scared. Like I felt like the main argument, like I sensed, was fear of death. And that's a very hard argument. Like, you're all doing all this because you're afraid of dying. It's very hard. Like, why are you trying to do this genetics revolution? I'm afraid of dying. I want to live more. I want to live better. Well, define that. That's also a question. Like, how do you define living better? And
that's right. And it's important to point out that's not just an interpretation that you're coming up with. That's something that's quite explicitly at the work of some of these people who are putting this forward, including, of course, famously Kurzweil, who has the intention of bringing his father back in some sort of technological form or through some technological means, because he was devastated by the loss of his father. And he often talks about living long enough to live forever, the idea being that life extension technologies will start to advance at such a rate that if you can just survive the next 20 to 30 years, you will effectively be able to live forever because of the nanotech and all of the other things that will be engineering our bodies to combat the aging process.
Yeah, but yeah, I sensed like this. There was lots of fear, and it's awful to. I don't think it's nice to talk about like other people like saying how they are and all this. But in this case, I will make an exception, and I felt like a sense of fear, like there was something like he was very afraid, and why are you afraid? What's the problem? If you're listening to this, Ray, don't be afraid. That's what I can do. I don't know. That's my point of view. Now, there is one other, I think, like intention in all of this, which is like governing nature, the forces of nature. You want to control. You need control. You need to have everything in the world exactly as you want it to be. I want that atom here. I want that atom there. I want this population over there. I think that's a very old desire, like controlling everything. And if you look at scripture, if you look at old writing, there is a very famous person who wants to do that, and or a persona or entity, whatever you want to call it, that's the devil. He wants to become like God. Now, I don't want to talk like religion in this talk, because it's unavoidable. You will start talking about this. But if you look at like this idea of becoming God, and you look at scripture, then you say, this looks very much alike. It's interesting. And then you have the other people talking about the apocalypse. That's perfect. Yeah, so...
Well, it certainly is. And again, this is not something that's tangential to the study of this. I think it really does go to the heart of it, because when we start talking about life extension technologies and the possibility of living forever and things like that, it has to be understood in terms of the history of those ideas, which has historically been used in almost, if not explicitly, at least a quasi-religious framework, where we have the intersection of science and alchemy and all of these kinds of esoteric arts that have been around for hundreds of years, and it's important to understand that there is quite a long, rich history of that in the scientific field. I mean, you go back to Isaac Newton, and people think of him in terms of gravity or in terms of the spectrum and things like that, but in fact, his life's work and something that he truly devoted himself to was alchemy, and he kept extensive alchemical notes and things, which you can go and read, with some of the bizarre things that he was experimenting with. And I think it's something that really is at the heart of the scientific process itself. And that's why I quoted from that book, Revolve, Man's Scientific Rise to Godhood, at the beginning of today's episode, because I think it really starts to get into some of those implications, that this is really something that drives the people who are behind this type of technology.
Yeah, and I think the main issue is fear. Everybody's doing this because of fear. You're afraid of losing control. That's a very interesting idea, because once the singularity, whatever happens, kicks in, there is no way of turning it off. Or whatever happens. There is, actually, I remember this book by It's the, let me look at that, Fire Upon the Deep. I found a very interesting idea there, which is once humanity or whatever society gets to the singularity, there is no point of going back to the planet or of even staying in the universe. That's something that very serious people are discussing. Like, if you have all this advancement, this great advancement in such a short time, and you discover a lot more about the universe, like the laws of physics, and you're even possibly recognize like there's so much more to the universe than we currently know. You're just like, maybe there's even a possibility, we just leave the universe and we go to someplace else. It's very serious people are talking about this. Now, maybe that's why we don't see aliens. I don't know, but it's an interesting idea. Yeah, and James, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I thought I had lost you. Sorry. And then there is another idea, which is I personally think it's possible. It's going to happen. I personally think it's very interesting that to find all those relationships. All
right. Okay. Well, let's hold it there. We're coming up on a break, but we'll hold it there, and we'll be back just after these messages to wrap up our conversation with Marc Ressl of marcspointofview.blogspot.com.
Vietnamese in Vietnam, Iraqis in a rocky land. We bombed them all. White phosphorus and napalm.
All right, welcome back, friends. We are here in the closing minutes of tonight's edition of Corbett Report Radio. Of course, I'm your host, James Corbett of CorbettReport.com, coming to you as always from the rainy climes today of Western Japan, and we're joined on the line all the way from Argentina by Marc Ressl of marcspointofview.blogspot.com, talking tonight about the concept of the singularity. So, Marc, we have just a few minutes here to wrap up tonight's conversation, so let's give it a go.
Okay. I guess I just blew a lot of people's mind. Okay, let's go for a little bit more. I just want to give you my point of view, my philosophical point of view. There's people who believe in materialism. They believe everything is what you see, what you get to touch. We are 3D plus time. Well, to those people, obviously, the singularity should be possible because you can copy. You can control all those atoms, and it should be possible. But I want to actually tell you what I think about the people who are more spiritual, who think like there might be a soul. That's my present point of view. I'm saying present, and it didn't used to be. And even if you believe in there is a soul, and it's not in this physical world, well, the technological singularity might be possible. Because if I'm not, my present point of view is like, there has to be some connection. If there is a soul, there has to be some connection between matter and the soul. So maybe you can copy that as well. So this is just to give you some food for your brains, and so you can grab your hairs, so eat each other and see what comes out. So my idea of this talk is just like, or I don't know, whatever it is, just like to encourage you people to just look for it and to read about it, to listen, to get involved, and to enjoy life, which is the most important thing. And I must say, I'm extremely optimistic about this whole scenario. I was like the perfect, how do you say this in English? The perfect pessimist a couple of years ago, but now I'm just seeing it very bright, because the answer to all these problems, all this, who controls this and everything, is consciousness. I mean, if you're just like, you know what's going on and you're aware of it and you spread the word and you make other people conscious, the only way is they have to accept it. I mean, you can't force consciousness, but if you help doing, that's what I'm trying to tell you. If you spread the consciousness, then everybody gets to hear about it, and nothing bad can happen.
Well, that is so true. That is exactly the way that the system, we already see the way it's being implemented now, even today, the way it's being brought in is to try to get people to sign on to it, either metaphorically or even literally when it comes to, for example, Google's new privacy policy, which after a certain date, everyone who uses Google and YouTube and all of their other parts of that octopus are going to be signing on to the privacy policy. So people give their privacy up in just because they like the services, or with this new iPhone app that analyzes people and determines if they have normal behavior. Again, it's you choose to download the app, you choose to implement it. So even on these small micro scales of the types of things we're talking about, it's always a question of people being convinced to take it on for themselves. So if we understand the risks and the dangers and what the problems are, and if we can help other people to understand that, then we do win, because it is about the liberation of the mind.
Mm-hmm. And humanity. The last word. You have free will. Use it.
Well said. Exactly right. Well, we are humans. We do have free will, and we don't lose that until we give up the struggle, until we just give in to all of the negativity. So you're exactly right. We have to maintain our positivity, and we have to keep spreading the word and the information and getting other people to understand our point of view. And on that note, if you want Marc's point of view, you can go to marcspointofview.blogspot.com to find some of his writings and videos and things that he's posted there. And Marc, I'm sure we'll have many things to talk about in the future, so I'm looking forward to having you on the program again.
Okay, well, thank you, and for everybody out there, enjoy this late night and early day, wherever you are.
Exactly. All right, thank you, and thank you to everyone who listened tonight, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow night.